Hi there, I'm Debra Corey, and I'm the co-author of a book titled Build It, a Rebel Playbook for World-Class Employee Engagement. And I'm here today with Pierre Goad from HSBC. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking time out of your very busy day to come and talk to us.
Happy to do so. This is one of my favorite topics.
Great. And actually, HSBC and Pierre contributed 2 plays to the book. I couldn't decide between the 2 of them, so we decided to be nice. We put one in the book, and one's going on the website because there's so many great videos that we wanted to provide links to.
Perfect.
So today we're going to talk about those plays, but before we do you want to explain a little bit about what you and your team do at HSBC?
Sure. So I'm Global Head of Communications at HSBC, a very large international bank, 230,000 odd employees.
Wow.
And the communications function that I run is one of 10 global functions at HSBC. So from 2011, we went to a more global model. So I'm accountable for all communications everywhere, internally and externally. So we're involved in media relations, content production, employee insight, employee engagement, and a few other things besides.
The whole gamut from
The
soup to nuts.
Exactly.
Definitely. Yeah. Do you have any advice? So as an HR person, I've been very lucky in some organizations. We've had communications people to work with. Any advice on what's the best way that we can partner with our comms business partners?
It's a really good question. So I've had the slightly odd experience. I double-hatted as head of HR at HSBC
Wow.
for 18 months while still running comms. So I have some direct experience of working with colleagues in HR as head of that function, but also as working with them as head of communications. My best advice to HR people would be to work with comms people with enthusiasm and an open mind. My observation would be this. HR as a function, and I think this cuts across all companies, it's not specific to one company or one sector, has become a prisoner of received wisdom created by some of the big consultancies who we're all familiar with, the Big Four and some of the specialized consultancies. I think in some cases communications functions also went down that path. But in most cases, corporates, large companies, have retained a communications brain in-house. And I think in the case of HR, oftentimes there's a high dependency on what consultants say. I think it's far more fruitful and actually far more interesting as a job to do more thinking on your own, work with the comms people that you know, find the ones who are interested in people issues, and you'll find most comms people are, and try and come up with interesting ideas, solutions, projects that will be specific to the organization you work for, rather than photocopying somebody else's plan that they've just sold to you for $100,000.
Well, it's perfect because that's exactly what our book is about being rebellious and doing things your own way, because you are right. I think that's part of the challenge as to why we've not had the high engagement in organizations that, the situation that we're in right now. So I think that makes complete sense.
And I think the way we think about things at HSBC, what we've tried to establish is a first principle: start with the audience.
Yes.
Always start with the audience. And when you start to think about the audience you're trying to reach, remember they're an awful lot smarter than you probably give them credit for. To operate as a human being in this day and age, you have to have really, really good filtering skills, because we are all bombarded with information day in, day out, thousands of pieces of information. So it's really important that both senior managers, function managers, and anybody trying to reach employees understands that it's a transaction.
Yes.
You're asking for people's time. Their time is valuable. They're not going to read your email, attend your town hall, look at your website just because they work for you. They're going to do it because it's worth their time.
Right.
And be really careful, because companies know this when it comes to selling products. If you cheat people, you ask for 30 seconds or you ask for half an hour, and they walk away going, well, I didn't get any value from that.
Yeah.
The next time you ask them for their time, they're not going to give it to you. So always start with the audience and treat them with the utmost respect, and recognize that they're actually really, really smart. And trying to get through to them is sometimes not so easy, sometimes not so hard, but trying to get through to them is what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And you need to think about how you do that and not assume that the audience is there waiting to be fed with a fire hose of information that you've created.
Yeah, I've learned that over the years. In the past, I used to think whatever I send out there, everyone's going to read. But now it's trying to create value and relevance to individual employees, and definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Actually, that's what my first book was on. I wish I had known you when I wrote my first book on communications. So my third book, if I write one on comms, we can partner on it and do it together. There you go. Great. Well, that's really helpful communications advice, which is a good segue into the great things that you did at HSBC. So as I said, there were 2 plays that we talked about. Can you maybe just sort of set the scene and tell us a little bit about what was going on in HSBC that you decided to be rebellious and do things a bit differently?
So a new management team took over in 2011, and we're going through another management transition at the beginning of 2018. So it's been a 7-year period.
Which in banking is a long time.
Which is a long time.
Yes.
So when the new management team started in 2011, and I came back to HSBC, having gone to work in Zurich for a while, we knew that there was stuff coming down the road that was going to be challenging. So we had regulatory issues that we knew were going to be public, we knew we were going to be fined, we knew that we were going to be criticized, and we knew that for our employees, this was going to be quite a blow to their own self-image, not just the image of HSBC, but their own self-image as employees of HSBC. So we knew we had that challenge coming straight at us. Then we had a second challenge. The new management team in 2011 had made the decision to move to a more global structure. So we declared, and that was the easy part, there are 4 global businesses and 10 global functions at HSBC, and all of them will now be managed globally.
So they were very decentralized before.
We had a very federal model previously, so every company has a matrix. In the past, HSBC's matrix was weighted towards country heads. They had a lot of room to maneuver. They had a lot of ability to create products, create their own processes, run their own IT and other systems. That had become inefficient and also was not keeping up with what our customers wanted. We're an international bank. Most of our customers want cross-border something.
Yes.
You don't come and bank at HSBC necessarily if you're just going to be using us in a single country. Our secret sauce is we're international. So we hadn't, in a sense, kept up with some of our customers. They were asking, why is the experience different in Hong Kong and in the UK? And it was not completely different, but it was a little bit different. That is a very, very big structural change. And it's not just about changing reporting lines and moving different bits and pieces around. It's about mindset. Convincing somebody in Malaysia that they actually have quite a bit to do with somebody working in Mexico and somebody working in Manchester. So those were our twin challenges. And what we decided was to start thinking about HSBC a little bit differently. And this was the CEO who came up with this analogy. He decided he was the mayor of a small town. It's 230,000 odd people. Everybody who lives in that town has an individual something, but they also have a connection with everybody else in that town because it's my town, it's where I live. So we decided to start treating HSBC as a single community. Despite the fact that we're spread across 60 odd countries, multiple product segments, different kinds of customers, we made a bet that people at HSBC, no matter where they were, had quite a lot in common with each other. And previously, the received wisdom had been, where I work in my country is where my loyalties lie. Yes, the logo might be the same, but actually, I'm not really that interested or that connected to the rest of HSBC.
This is a big statement about global mindset, global approach.
And it was driven by the management team was experienced. Many of us had worked abroad, so we'd worked in other countries. And so our gut instinct was, well, actually, no, people do feel a deep attachment to HSBC. It's had a very long history, and they probably do feel that they're part of a community. We've just never let them express that. And so that's what we set out to do. And one of the ways we set out to do it was with something called HSBC Now, which is a series of videos that come out at any point during the week. When we started, it was a weekly video program, like a TV news magazine. And we decided from the start it was going to be about employees and not necessarily about banking. And what we wanted to do, it's sort of the old maxim, show, don't tell. We wanted to show the person sitting in Manchester watching a video about somebody in Mexico that actually they really did have a lot in common.
Right.
They were doing quite similar jobs, working in quite similar offices, dealing with quite similar customers. And you know what? It worked.
Was it difficult getting people to do these videos at first?
It was difficult at the start to build the pipeline of ideas. Now, I mean, it's not easy. It's never easy to find the great stories that you want to tell, but we definitely have a very full pipeline. People are very happy and excited to be featured on HSBC now, because everybody likes their 30 seconds of fame, but they also like to tell their story. It's a very natural human desire to want to tell your story, whether as an individual or as a group. So we get lots and lots of ideas, and we filter them and try and choose the very best. It's true, when we started roughly 6 years ago, we had to go out hunting for the stories. But it took off pretty quickly. And we made, I think, a couple of key decisions along the way. We decided that most of the time, the videos that we did on HSBC Now would not feature senior managers. So it really is about employees. It's not senior manager videos. We do some of those for a specific purpose, but it wasn't part of the Now concept. And we also decided that the program would be fronted by employees. So we were working with a couple of video agencies, and their advice was, well, you should hire this very well-known, experienced BBC broadcaster to front the program. And we said, well, but they don't work at HSBC.
Right.
So it's going to be clear to everybody that we've brought somebody in from outside to try and tell our stories. Let's see if we can find some employees who'd like to have a bit of a go at fronting a program.
Probably found it interesting and exciting to do.
It worked out tremendously well, because not only did we get a great group of volunteers, but through a little bit of sort of video editing magic, it meant that it appeared that the show was being hosted from a different location every time we did it, because we'd film the links with whoever was doing the hosting, wherever they were. Now we've moved on, and in the age of YouTube and so on, we send out individual stories, but the underlying principle has been the same. These are employees doing whatever it is they do. It could be about a charity they're involved in, it could be about a very personal story, and it could be about banking, but often it isn't. And sort of our tagline that we use to explain this to people internally and externally now, as HSBC Now, is ordinary people doing extraordinary things. That's simple.
Do you have any favorite stories? I know it's probably hard over 6 years. Anything that's made a big difference?
It's really hard to, it is really hard to pick some out. So we've won an awful lot of awards for individual stories in sort of different communications competitions. So some of our big hits, there was a gentleman who had leukemia who managed to find a donor.
Through the Now
through
video?
Through HSBC Now, because people all around the world went in for the matching test. We had a great story about a lesbian couple in Taiwan, which is still quite a conservative society, who got married, and HSBC's local CEO gave away the bride.
Aww.
That one, that's still winning awards. That one, Jennifer's Wedding, you can find it on YouTube. Probably one of my favorites, though, is it was an extended video that we did, and it's an old idea, but old ideas are sometimes still very good ideas. It's a day in the life of HSBC. And we had employees film themselves on their phones. Phones are now so good that the video is very usable, all around the world, different times of the day, depending on what they thought was interesting. We had them send in that video. We have an app that people can download so they can contribute video. And we put it together as one edit. And I think that was probably my all-time favorite, because it starts with somebody waking up in Asia at 4 a.m. because they've got a really long commute, and takes you all the way through people commuting into work and what they're doing at the office. And I just thought that was a really lovely way of explaining just how diverse HSBC is and how wide our reach is.
And this is the play that we've actually put on the website, and the reason is so that people can watch these videos, because they really are lovely. The one that you just talked about, I watched. And if I go back to your original reason for doing it about connection, I mean, it must break down barriers. You know, you get on the phone call with someone, you think, oh, and you say to them, I just saw your video, and you're a bit more human after watching them.
It does. I mean, we do an awful lot of employee research, employee insight. We sort of have moved some of the sentiment indicators in the right direction. Very difficult to demonstrate causality, but based on the research we've done, based on my own observations, just based on the popularity of some of these videos, I have to think that this has helped create that sense of community. And that sense of community definitely comes through in some of the measures that we track. So, you know, the classic things you'd look at: belief in the strategy, belief in senior management, recommend as a place to work, recommend products and services, all of the sorts of questions people have been asking for years and years. We ask those and a bunch more. And that sense of community is a really important underpinning to create positive sentiment and engagement.
Especially in such a big global organization.
Yeah, correct.
Definitely connect people. And I think it's something, you know, people don't have to necessarily go out and do now videos, but there's lots of different ways that organizations can create that connection and bring that human face when you're working globally or even just within one office.
Yeah, and you know, I suppose I had a somewhat traditional background moving into communications after a career in journalism, but I happened to work for two very good organizations, Canadian Broadcasting Corp and then the Wall Street Journal, two very different organizations. Yes. But what I learned there, which is still true to this day, is all good stories are people stories.
Aww,
and
I like that.
That's the way I was trained as a radio reporter and then as a print reporter. So even the Wall Street Journal back in the day, it's changed a little since, but very serious business newspaper. We were all trained there had to be a real person in the second paragraph of every story or nobody would read it.
That's a great way of thinking of it. I know in HR we try to do more storytelling, and just that simple tip, I think, whether you do a story or whether you do any other type of communications, bring the human into it.
If you think about what you talk about with your friends and what you talk about with your family and what you talk about with your colleagues at work, it's usually about people.
Yes.
People are interested in people. They're not interested in buildings, institutions, pieces of paper, policy statements. They might look at that stuff, absorb it if they have to. It's part of their job. But what really gets people excited, what really gets people interested, and what they'll remember is a great story about people.
Somebody. And link it to that. I was wondering why you've got such a great voice. You were on the radio before. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
That makes sense then.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you miss it?
I do, but I don't miss getting up at 4 a.m. I was on a morning public affairs program.
Oh my goodness.
Montreal, on air at 6. It was brutal.
Yes.
But a lot of fun.
Now you just fly all over the world with HSBC. Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we've got a little bit more on now on the website.
Yeah.
Maybe we can transition into your other program, the exchange program.
So the exchange program was, again, developed to address a need. So when we started to look at and think about the regulatory issues that we knew were coming at us in 2011, although some of them were not yet public, we recognized that there probably was a cultural issue at HSBC, partly a reflection of the previous federal structure. But some of the things that had happened, and you know, we've been very honest with people, we've said sorry, we've said yes, we did this, and we've committed to fixing it, and we've all been working really hard for the last 7 years to do that. But when we looked at some of the things that we'd done, the errors were people not flagging them. The errors were people not sending a message up the line because they didn't know how to do that, A, or B, they thought they weren't supposed to or would be punished in some way. So we started to talk about that as a speak-up culture.
Right.
Most of HSBC's cultural features, and I've worked there a long time, I think are very good. But there probably was an issue, when I think back to my earlier days, with speaking up.
Right.
It wasn't encouraged. It was, you know, quite a traditional company in some ways, hierarchical.
Common in many companies.
Common in many large companies. And if you were lower down in the organization, you really didn't feel it was your place to speak up if you spotted something that looked a bit odd. We could have avoided some of the problems that we got ourselves into if people had spoken up. So to change that culture, we decided to do something that was quite interesting as an experiment, and it was rebellious and quite radical.
Yes.
We created HSBC Exchange,
which is also called.
Which is also called Shut Up and Listen.
I like that.
Yeah, well, HSBC now is also called Boss Free TV, so we clearly like our taglines. HSBC Exchange was the Shut Up and Listen project. So if people are afraid of speaking up, how do you signal to them that you absolutely have permission to speak up? Well, you create a meeting that's hosted by a manager where the manager is not allowed to talk. There is no agenda, and it's the employees who own the meeting.
That is very rebellious.
They can talk about whatever they want. And for the first few months, they talked about the toilets, they talked about the cafeterias.
All the important things
in
life.
They talked about photocopiers not working. And they talked about the stuff that had been
Right.
winding them up, that was sort of day to day. As we've moved on, they started to talk about other issues, business issues, all kinds of things. And it's become embedded at HSBC. I'm going to exchange. When's my next exchange? We gather the feedback, but really the purpose of it is just to create a very strong cultural signal that speaking up is not only allowed, it's encouraged.
Yeah.
And what we've been able to track through our research is that people do feel that we're very genuine in encouraging a speak up culture. There still is a fear factor. We're working on it. It's really hard to get people past the point where they think they're going to be punished in some way for
Right.
speaking out of turn or speaking up. But the numbers are moving in the right direction. Exchange continues to evolve. People do different types of exchanges now. People have done cross exchanges, just people from different areas getting together to talk. In the US, they did the big exchange one day where they had 20 simultaneous exchanges in a big room, 20
Sort of
tables.
like hackathons.
Kind of like hackathons, and so we'll continue to experiment. It will continue to evolve. At some point, we probably stop talking about it because it just becomes part of the way we work at HSBC.
What I like about it is there's some companies I've worked at before where you've got these great idea programs and you pay people to do great ideas, which is fine in some situations, but you've brought it into, you use the word culture, you've brought it into the culture and you've made it a part of, as you say, day to day, where it's encouraged and you get rewarded just by doing it. You don't necessarily have to get a financial reward for it.
No, you don't. The really interesting thing from a sort of management point of view is because of all the research we do, I can prove with numbers, and we're a bank, so we love numbers, I can prove with numbers that people who go to exchange meetings are better people. So across a whole range of different questions, they answer more positively.
Right.
And again, it's not causality, it's correlation, but they're not self-selecting because you get invited to an exchange meeting, you don't invite yourself. So it's not just the most positive people that are going to exchange meetings. I mean, there could be some element of that, but we're really confident because we've got the data to back it up, that if people go to exchange meetings, they're more positive about their team, they're more positive about the bank, they're more positive about the strategy, they're more positive about senior management, they're more positive about just about everything, by a factor of anywhere between 10 and 15 percentage points.
Wow. I'm not surprised because if you think about employee engagement, it's about having a voice and feeling like you're making a difference.
Yeah.
And by attending these meetings and having a voice, it sounds like that's exactly what's happening.
It is, and I think the other thing which people forget is communications is dialogue, not monologue.
Yes.
So if you're expecting to just talk to people all day long, and that's communicating, well, you're wrong, because at least half of communication should be listening.
Yes.
So exchange is part of a listening program in a way as well.
Was it hard getting your managers on board? Because it must be really difficult the first couple meetings, just sitting there and listening and not wanting to present ideas.
So when we did a sort of pilot in a couple of regions, and there's one famous story where at the first exchange meeting, nobody spoke for 20 minutes because nobody knew how.
Oh, bless.
Without an agenda, without some direction.
Right. They want structure.
They wanted structure. We got past that. People who are new to the organization and come to their first exchange meeting, you can sort of see them looking around going, not sure how this works. But people pick up on it. And as we've been able to demonstrate with sort of hard evidence through the research we do, but also just anecdotally, managers know that exchange meetings are really popular with people, that they get some good ideas, and that even if they don't get good ideas, just having a conversation with your team or with your skip reports or whatever it might be can be really valuable because you get a chance to listen to them. They get a chance to express their views and opinions. They get a chance to talk to each other. And typically most people leave an exchange meeting going, well, that was a pretty useful way to spend an hour.
Yeah, and I would even think that it has an impact on the relationship with the manager, because
Absolutely.
your manager is actively listening to you, and if they do that in the meeting, it encourages you to talk to them at other points in time.
Correct, absolutely.
Great. Well, it's good that you've got data to support it also. So you've given us two really great ideas, which as you say them, they think, you know, I hear them and I think, gosh, everybody should be doing something like that. It sounds like a no-brainer, but a lot of companies aren't brave enough to do that. So it's good to hear that you've seen positive results of, you know, doing things a bit differently and rebelliously.
Yeah, no, I think we're very pleased with both HSBC Now and HSBC Exchange. You've got to be willing to fail as well.
Yes.
So a couple of things we tried didn't work, but I think if you're open, if you're thoughtful, it's worth having a go, because you might just discover that something you've thought of or something that you've adapted from somewhere else could work really well to solve whatever particular problem you're having in the organization you're working for. But I think customization is key. Adapting to your particular circumstances is key. I really don't think there's sort of one-size-fits-all programs that you can just buy in that will work.
Right, and you addressed a specific need of the business.
Exactly.
So it's what's going on in your business and what would work. So do you have any final tips to people? If people have listened and they thought, wow, I want to do one or both of these, is there anything that you would suggest from having done this for the last 6 or 7 years?
Well, I'll come back to what I said at the top. Start with the audience.
Yes.
Who are you trying to reach? Why are you trying to reach them? What do you want them to remember? Are you trying to change their behaviors? Are you trying to change their minds? Are you trying to convince them to do something differently? Start with the audience, respect the audience, and you'll usually come up with a pretty good answer. Don't treat the audience as the afterthought.
Yes.
Start there, then solve backwards to figure out what it is you should be doing.
I think that's really good
Achieve
advice.
the desired effect. And the other thing we talk about a lot is communications and other functions for that matter in large companies, large organizations, tend to focus a lot on measuring output. I don't do that. I sort of put a stop to it. I still have lots of people on my team who are absolutely determined to measure output. How many views, how many this, how many emails got opened. I want to measure outcomes, and that's the principle we use. So if we've spotted a problem, decided that we could help make that problem better, then we want to measure whether we've helped make that problem better. We don't measure how many videos we've done. We don't measure how many exchange meetings we've had. We look at whether the sentiment readings that we've got, the anecdotal evidence, the feel, nothing wrong with gut instinct. If it feels like it's the outcome is what you were after, then you've done well. If you're just measuring output, you'll never know whether you actually achieved what you were trying to achieve.
Right. Just because someone opens an email or clicks on something doesn't mean that they're engaging with it. So
Correct.
It's even just the buzz in the office. How do people talk about those programs and other programs? I think it's really meaningful.
Exactly right.
Well, I could talk to you for hours. Maybe we'll do another video another time, but this has been really helpful, and the whole idea of the video is just really try to encourage people through the innovative things that you're doing, especially the fact that a big global company could do this. So we talk about how rebels come in different sizes and shapes, and you've definitely shown that, you know, big, powerful banks can still be rebels and make a difference. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you want to go on the website and see some of these videos, you can do that. It's rebelplaybook.com, or by all means, grab yourself a copy of the book and read a little bit more about the play that Pierre was helpful enough to contribute to. And go out there and be your own rebel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.